Well, good morning and welcome to 11. So I've just got my cable tangled in the microphone here. Yes, good morning. It's 11ses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. It's show number 229. It's Wednesday. It's the 6th of April. Let's just get myself settled down. Weather outside, a bit brighter than it was first thing. It's a little bit of a grizzly day this morning. We've got quite a packed show again for you today. We'll be looking at some Rochdale riders who've raised cash for Ukraine medical supplies. The story I missed out on last week, how you can order a Ukrainian e-bike and support their military. The MotoGP schedule was disrupted by a cargo flight engine problem, which was partly put down to sanctions against Russia. Stuart Garner, former boss of Norton, has walked free from court after sentencing. And MCE Insurance customers, you may recall they went bust recently, are beginning to receive their partial paybacks. And we'll have a quick look at a Harley Davidson that will probably shock the purist because the 500cc bike is a parallel twin. And then finally, today's talking point, we'll finish up by looking at the DVSA prosecuting a company selling illegal e-bikes and talk about the implications of that particular story. We have Clive looking in. Morning, Clive. Good to see you. And we have Kevin Paul looking in too. Good to see you too. Morning, all everybody else who is going to be looking in as the show goes on. Don't forget, if you've got a comment, if you've got a question, anything you'd like to say, basically, I'm more than happy to try and answer that during the show if I possibly can, if not at the end of the show. Okay, let's crack on then. One thing to say before we go any further is it is the last call for tonight's Science of Being Seen. Now, the Science of Being Seen, you'll probably recall, was a presentation I put together for Biker Down, the course that's gone nationwide for the fire services. I wrote that over the sort of winter of 2011-2012. We first presented it in the spring of 2012. By the end of 2012, the Biker Down team at Kent had won a Prince Michael of Kent International Road Safety Award, and the presentation was used by most Biker Down teams across the country right up until lockdowns in March last year shut the courses down. Sadly, Science of Being Seen has now been dropped by Biker Down, although they do have a Thinking Biker presentation, which actually seems to include most of what I've been talking about. So I'll be interested to see how they credit me for that. But anyway, if you want to come along and see the full presentation as I developed it and as I've updated it over the years, then it's on tonight, Wednesday, 6th of April. 8 p.m. this evening. Tickets are a £5. You can follow the link which is up on the intro to the show to get your ticket, and hopefully I'll see you there later. Right, now let's crack on with the news then. The first story is about a group of motorcyclists from Rochdale called the Brass Knuckle Riders, and they've hosted a charity ride, and the aim was to raise money to purchase and supply medical supplies to East Lancs for Ukraine, which is a team which is actually distributing the aid within the Ukraine itself. The community bike ride was organised in just 12 days, and a fairly astonishing 1,426 riders from all over the northwest of England turned up to the event. And they got riders from as far afield as Birmingham and Scotland, and they all met at Birch westbound services on the M62, and they did a full lap of the M60 motorway. Not the most exciting ride, I'm sure, but on the other hand, when you've got so many riders together, it's hard to organise something like that on anything other than a motorway. And then they ended up back at the services where they started. And so as a result, last Wednesday, Brass Knuckle Riders are able to present a cheque for £4,475 to East for Ukraine. Now, East for Ukraine, they have been able to cross the Polish border into Ukraine, so they're actually delivering aid to Ukrainians who are actually in the war zone. And rather than delivering food or clothing, they've been focusing on delivering bandages, tourniquet, and hospital quality supplies. So hats off to everybody for that particular activity. The second story today is actually linked to the first one. It's one I missed out last week. I did actually intend to run it, and then I'd forgotten to put the bit of blurb in about it. So here it is. A Ukrainian startup called MGO Technology. They're actually asking for crowdfunding to support the final development of their new e-bike. It's called a Scramper, SCR I'm sure you'll get the play on words in the name there. And they've already created an electric scooter. They've developed a product line which includes energy storage devices and smart batteries. And their latest project is this. Let me try and get that up on screen again. There we go. So that is the electric motorcycle that we're talking about. It's appearing in an Indiegogo campaign. The bike is... What will happen is you need to put down a 21% deposit for the, sorry, I'll start again. You get a 21% discount on the future price if you contribute to the Indiegogo campaign. But what they say is the special point is that you'll be helping to supply a special militarized version of the bike to the Ukraine Armed Forces. For every 15 bikes sold on Indiegogo, MGO will supply a bike to the military, they say. They'll also make charging stations available. A statement from the firm said, at the moment we're launching our product and at the same time we want to help our army. Our Scramper motorbike is great for exploring an area in stealth mode and silent patrol actions. The more motorcycles you order, the more motorbikes and substations we can produce for the armed forces. The bike's got a fairly high ground clearance, 207 millimeters. So it's a kind of crossover between an urban and an off-road bike. It uses 17-inch wheels front and rear, fairly small sizes, 110 at the front, 130 at the rear, which means they should be easily available. It's on a tubular steel frame, so it should be pretty robust. Upside down front forks, monoshock at the rear, probably not quite so essential for a military bike, and single discs front and rear. Now, interestingly, the manufacturers have actually chosen to fit the bike with a conventional 4-speed gearbox. There's a picture of the motor itself. The motor itself puts out a nominal power of 9 kilowatts and a peak power of 16 kilowatts at 7,200 RPM. Now, combined with the gearbox, that allows the machine to reach a top speed of around about 80 miles per hour. At urban speeds, range is said to be up to 200 kilometers, falling off to around 90 to 110 kilometers at motorway speed. So that's sort of 55, 60 miles or so. It does get regenerative braking too. A particular feature of the 10 kilowatt hour battery is that it's designed to handle hot temperatures. It's said to be suitable for conditions such as you'd find in the Middle East and South Africa, and to outperform other batteries when the weather is hot. MGO have developed and patented their own cell cooling system to achieve this, and it allows the 104 amp hour battery to operate for up to 30 minutes at a peak of 24 kilowatts without cell degradation, all without exceeding a temperature of 40 Celsius and maintaining a durability of 3,000 charge cycles. The bike comes complete with a fast charger on board and is able to deliver an 80% charge in 1 hour and to go from 0 to 100 in about 90 minutes. And the charging cable is apparently included with the bike. Right, okay, so yes, Clive says nice looking bit of kit. Yes, I think it's not an unpleasant looking motorcycle. It's better than some of the weird and wacky designs that electric motorcycle designers seem to be going for. Don't forget, you are watching Survival Skills. Kevin Williams here with Elevenses. You can catch this show on Wednesdays and Sundays at 11. It normally goes out live. The next 3 shows, possibly 4 shows, are all going to have to be recorded because I'm off to Scotland for a bit of a break. But the shows will go out as regularly scheduled. 11 o'clock. Just set your alarms for then. You can catch up if you miss one on Facebook, or probably more easily on YouTube, where they are all listed in order in a playlist. You don't have to go searching for them. So yes, make a note of those. And as I say, it will be recorded shows for the next couple of weeks. Right, now, okay, next story again also involves Ukraine, because the war is having impacts far beyond Eastern Europe. Now, Friday's practice sessions at the Argentine Grand Prix were disrupted because of the non-arrival of one of the cargo planes, which had been shipping bikes and equipment for the teams from the previous weekend's race, which had been held in Indonesia. And as a result, the MotoGP organisers were forced to cancel Friday's running at the Termas de Rio Hondo circuit because the plane was actually grounded in Kenya with an engine fault. And it was actually only able to take off in the early hours of Friday morning and wasn't expected to arrive until late Friday evening. Too late for the teams whose bikes were on board to get the bikes ready to ride for Saturday morning's practice. So as a result, the practice schedule was revised. Now, Dorna CEO Carmelo Espelita, he said its freight problems have actually been compounded by the war in Ukraine, and that the sanctions placed on Russia have had an effect on them, because at least 20% of the cargo haulage companies that MotoGP has used in the past are Russian based. So there we go. The war's having effects everywhere. Now, next story. Stuart Garner, the former owner of Norton Motorcycles, as you know, has been in court. His sentencing was finally carried out last week, and he was handed an 8-month jail sentence for 3 counts of breaching the employer-related investment (ERI) rules, but then walked free because they were subsequently suspended for 2 years. Now, what happened was that Garner admitted illegally investing 11 million from pension schemes, 3 pension schemes for which he was the sole trustee, into the business, and he was sentenced to, as I say, 8 months imprisonment, suspended for 2 years. He appeared in Derby at the Crown Court last Thursday. He was also ordered to pay £20,716.69 in costs. I love it the way they actually managed to calculate it down to 69p. And he's been disqualified from being a director for 3 years. The offences were in relation to 3 contribution schemes: Dominator 2012, Commando 2012, and Donington MC. And there were a total of 227 scheme members affected. He invested more than 5% of the holdings from each scheme into his business, Norton Motorcycle Holdings. Not surprisingly, there have been a number of comments in the motorcycle press about the sentence. Now, don't forget, if you enjoy these shows, you can pop over to my coffee page and support me over there. As I mentioned on Sunday, I have put up a large tranche of posts from 2020, and if you go and look, you'll find that there are my Tips on Tuesday and Skills on Sunday series going back to 2014 already online. So I've only actually got 7 months still to put up, and then there will be a huge resource, well over 800 articles in fact. So do go over there, have a look. There are plenty of free stuff to read. If you like what you're reading for free, then a small contribution of £3 will open up access to all these articles for a month. Right, so right, what else? Yes, another failed business. According to the MCN website, riders and other policyholders have started to receive partial refunds from the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, the FSCS, after the collapse of MCE Insurance Company Limited at the end of last year. Now, MCE Insurance sold a range of motor products, obviously motorcycles, but also private car and van insurance. And their permission to write insurance was actually suspended on November the 5th last year. And 2 weeks later, the company was placed into administration. They were one of the UK's biggest motorcycle insurers, and the collapse affected in total around 105,000 policyholders. Now, initially, these people who were insured with MCE Insurance were told that they would continue to be covered until the end of their policy, and that claims on those policies will still be paid out. But after examining the books, the administrators, Kroll, determined that the company couldn't be saved, and they cancelled those policies. And that meant that holders of the policies are actually eligible for a refund up to 90% of the unused portion of the policy via the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. The problem is, of course, not surprisingly, that many customers were extremely unhappy with this because many of them had parted with a lot of money, in some cases, £1,000 or more. For insurance. They weren't getting their money back straight away, but they were now having to find the same sum again, probably more in fact, for a second policy before the first policy was actually refunded. You may be aware that MCE UK, the brokers, are still operating and offering insurance. Now, the reason for this is not too complicated, but it is confusing people. Both firms were part of the same parent group, but it's the insurance arm that folded and not the brokering service. So any new policies taken out with MCE, the broker, are underwritten by a different insurance, Sabre Insurance Group. Right, okay, so how do you like your Harleys? Probably V-twins. So you're probably going to be horribly shocked to see this particular bike on a rolling road, because it is a twin and it's said to be a 500, and if you look closely you'll see that it has the new Harley Davidson logo on the tank. It's the same one that apparently shows up on the Pan American, which was recently released by Harley. So that's the bike undergoing the dyno run. The engine casings, people have had a look at those, and this near production ready machine, if you notice, it's got indicators, it's already got mirrors fitted. It seems to be ready to run. It bears a very strong resemblance to another bike that I've talked about here in the not too distant past, and that's this one here. And this one, if you look very closely, you'll spot bears the Benelli logo on the tank. There it is. Okay, so what's the connection between Benelli and Harley Davidson? Well, the answer is that this Leoncini 500, which is visually identical to the Harley Davidson, is built by QJ Motor, who are the owners of Benelli, and also who have a tie-up now with Harley Davidson. So it's being speculated that the engine itself, the motor, will be entirely unaltered. And that would make sense because the Benelli actually fits into the A2 license category. It makes 47 horsepower, which of course makes it eligible for the intermediate license in the EU and the UK and a number of other countries. It's possible that when the Harley version actually appears, you'll get some extra chrome. Maybe wire wheels would be a possibility, but frankly, with the indicators, headlight, mirrors, and the instrument pod all fitted, it's looking fairly close to the finished item. Okay, so on to today's discussion point then. Well, pretty much since the first Elevenses show, which was just over 2 years ago, of course, I've been talking about the issues of working out when an e-bike is not an e-bike. It depends partly on where you live, and it depends partly on your use of the terminology. Now, to my mind, a big chunk of the confusion about what actually constitutes an e-bike arises because of the use of the abbreviations bike and cycle. Now, both have come to mean either a bicycle, which, as we all know, is something we pedal, or a motorcycle, which is powered by some kind of motor, which is driven by a power source. In the dim, distant past, it was steam. Petrol, of course, is by far and away the most common. Diesel has been used, and hydrogen is also on the cards for future motorcycles. And of course, we have electricity. But the arrival of the e-bikes have kind of muddied the water because the term is frequently used to describe both an electrically assisted bicycle and an electrically propelled motorcycle. Now, technically, for a bicycle, we should really be talking about a pedelec. That would be a much better term, obviously a portmanteau of pedal and electricity. So it clearly describes a bicycle where the rider's pedaling is assisted by a small electric motor. Now, these pedelecs, they include an electronic controller which actually cuts the power to the motor in two circumstances. Either when the rider's not pedaling, so the rider has to pedal to keep moving, or when they reach a certain speed, and that will be set by the local authorities in the jurisdiction in which the bike is being used. Now, because they still have to be pedaled, the pedelecs are classified as conventional bicycles in most countries, and that means they can often be ridden by children of a certain age, as well as riders with no kind of driving license, and frequently there's no helmet legislation, and they can typically be used on other places or places where other cycles, ordinary pedal cycles, can be used, so cycle paths and in the UK bridleways, for example. Now, electrically propelled motorcycles are also pretty well easily defined, aren't they? They've got no pedals, obviously. Dim, distant FS1Es apart. The rider needs to be of the correct age. They need to hold a license for the vehicle. They need usually to wear a helmet, and they're likely to need tax, of course, and insurance like we do here in the UK. And there will be rules about where they can be ridden. For example, in the UK, you can ride a motorcycle or a moped on a road, obviously, or a green lane open to motor vehicles, but you can't use cycle lanes which are closed to motorcycles, and you can't ride them in cycle ways. So the problem area really is where these electric powered bikes fall between the two definitions. Now, there are, for example, more powerful pedelecs which can exceed the top speed set by the local rules, and there are also power on demand bikes which have a twist grip. So they can be ridden on power regardless of whether or not the rider is pedaling. You can pedal if you want, but of course many riders on these things, you just see them sitting on top of the bike with their feet on the pedals, not spinning, and riding on the twist grip. And then there are the bikes that look like bicycles, but because they're built around mountain bike components, they often have a sort of a very similar frame to a mountain bike. They use the sort of typical suspension components from a mountain bike. They even on some of these bikes they use the same sort of derailleur components, but they have no pedals and they perform like a small motorcycle. Now, the problem doesn't stop there because the legislation isn't the same across borders. For example, pedelecs in the UK and EU, because we follow similar rules, they must be no more powerful than 250 watts. And you can use them anywhere. You can use a conventional bicycle with the one provision that you are over the age of 14. But in Canada, for example, laws vary by province. Generally speaking, the maximum power output for an e-bike is 500 watts, so twice what it is here in the UK and Europe. And it's limited to a top speed of 32 kilometers per hour, which is about 20 miles per hour. Some provinces allow the use of a throttle, others don't. And similarly, the US doesn't have standard rules across all its states either. Although federal law apparently defines a low-speed e-bike as a 2 or 3-wheeled vehicle with fully operable pedals and an electric motor of less than 750 watts. That's 1 horsepower. And it also defines a maximum speed on a paved level surface where powered solely by a motor whilst ridden by an operator who weighs 170 pounds as less than 20 miles per hour. Okay, so again, the implication there is you don't actually have to pedal, you can just twist and go. So if you happen to import a pedelec from abroad, there's no guarantee, of course, that it will actually comply with local law, specifically UK and EU law. And the problem is that if it's not a legal pedelec, then it's actually a moped or a motorcycle, depending on its speed. And the same rules will apply then, in that case, for any other moped or motorcycle. So it's easy enough to see how somebody who's a bit technically unsophisticated and doesn't know the rules could end up riding an illegal e-bike. But it's also equally easy to see how someone knowing full well that the bike they're riding is illegal would hope to sort of go under the radar, as it were, if they don't do anything too outrageous on it, because it's difficult to tell them apart. So where does the problem need to be tackled? Well, I've always said that the answer is actually to go to the outlet that is selling the e-bikes, particularly those which have in the small print somewhere only for use on private land. And it turns out that in a legal first, the DVSA have just announced their successful prosecution of a UK company which has been illegally supplying high-powered electric assist pedal cycles. There's another technical term for you, e-packs, which are not a pro for UK road use. Now, the case was actually brought under the Motorcycles Type Approval Regulations 2018, and the DVSA say it sends out a clear message to any in the industry that are not following the rules that they will need to get their houses in order. Now, the case was actually heard at the Worcester Magistrates Court, and the company concerned were Monster E-Bikes Limited. You'll find their website fairly easily if you go and have a look for it. Oddly enough, many of their bikes seem to be out of stock at the moment. And they were supplying Falcon branded bikes, and these were fitted with motors of up to 8,000 watts. So you remember that the legal limit in the UK for an e-cycle and a pedelec is 250 watts. So you can see these are actually rather more powerful. And they were said to be capable, according to the advertising on the site, of speeds capable of 70 miles per hour plus. But of course, they didn't have the type approval in place to ensure that the design and construction is actually suitable for riding a machine at such speeds. Now, Sadie Clark, who led the DVSA's investigation, was quoted as saying, "This is a landmark case. High-powered electric bikes that have not had their design and construction properly approved pose a danger to their riders, other road users and pedestrians." Well, we can argue the toss on that, I'm sure. Just because something isn't tested doesn't mean it's dangerous automatically, but if it is tested, it is a guarantee that you have a particular standard of construction. And she continued, "Today's verdict opens the way for the DVSA to progress our work in ensuring the electric bicycle market is safe and compliant for everyone." The DVSA's senior market surveillance investigator, Emma Jane Morris, said, "Manufacturers, importers, and retailers of these bikes need to be aware of the legal requirements that affect their business. Buyers also need to be aware of the law affecting them." Yes, well, I've already commented on the awareness issue. Now, looking further afield at comments on this, one article on another website said that keeping e-bikes status as a bicycle is critical to the sector and to the wider industry, where there is a universal agreement that future growth will come from. So basically what the writer here is actually saying is that it's essential to police the laws so that people work within the laws. Somebody else wasn't so happy, implied basically that riders were just getting around conveniently and cheaply and shouldn't be singled out. well, they're not being singled out. It's the supplier of the bike who's being singled out. But another said that laws should be followed and cited another problem area which needs looking at. It's illegal to use personally owned e-scooters in Britain, but Halfords does brisk business selling huge numbers of them. They only used to warn about the law on one web page, but now warn during the online buying process. Whether their staff in the shops warn, I don't know. Hopefully they do. And that brings us into another field of whether or not it's right and proper for these bikes, these e-scooters, only to be available to hire, whether you shouldn't be allowed to use a legally constructed, legally built and legally regulated e-scooter. That's a very good question indeed. And it brings us around to another point of debate. Something else that I know is under investigation at the moment is whether or not the speed limit on these bikes should actually be raised, the legal pedelecs, I mean. As there is a huge shift to drop speed limits in city centres to 20 miles per hour, 30 kph in other countries, it means that the speed of traffic has been reduced. Now, one thing that is proven by a number of studies to reduce accidents is actually evening out the speeds of vehicles that are travelling on these roads. So there's a big argument to suggest that, in fact, we should be upping the speed limit on our e-pedal bikes to 20 miles per hour, which would enable them to move in the flow of traffic rather than being constantly overtaken by cars, buses, vans, etc. And that brings us to yet another debating point. You may have followed some of the stories I've done on electric bikes over the past couple of years, and you may have noticed that some of them are very restricted in terms of top speed. Some, in fact, can only do 20 miles per hour. Now, if you have an electrically propelled motorbike, I'm not going to call it a motorcycle or a moped, shouldn't it have the same advantages as a pedelec if it's regulated to a top speed of 20 miles per hour, if the pedelecs have a top speed of 20 miles per hour? And then, if that's the case, why shouldn't somebody be able to operate one of these minus a license, minus a helmet, but plus the ability to use cycle lanes? There's no logic that I can see for restricting pedelecs, which are propelled by the rider's legs, to give them a benefit that you can't get from riding a bike, which you don't have to pedal. I mean, not everybody is fit enough even to pedal an electric bicycle. And if we want to get people out of cars and onto sustainable transport like this, then I think we have to explore these options. After all, the only difference will be whether you're pedaling or not, and I don't think that should be the major criterion. Anyway, that's it for today. So over to you. I'll be interested in your comments on this. I'll be very interested to hear what people have to say. Just to round off the show, don't forget my mini ride out. That's coming soon. It is going to be from St Albans out across the Chilterns. It'll be a couple of hours on the bike, probably, well, it won't be more than about 75 or 80 miles. We'll probably do about 2 hours riding total and have a break somewhere. Saturday, the 3rd of April, 10 o'clock. You can pre-book at the link at the top of the show. I'll just, I've got to find it for the moment. Hang on a minute. There it is. Let me just give you that link in the on the screen. Talk amongst yourselves for a moment while I sort that out. There it is. I usually have that ready to go and forgot today. As I say, one final call for sights are being seen. Hope I see you there tonight. If you're out and about on your bike today, do stay safe and stay shiny side up. Thanks for looking in. And hopefully see you in the tonight for Science Being Seen. And if not, don't forget the next show is on Sunday, but it will be a recording, as will the 2 shows or 3 shows to follow. So that's it from me today. Kevin Williams, Thank you once again.